1990 when apartheid in it,
Good evening,
So
good evening, good evening, and welcome to Couch Conversations with the Doctors, where real health is wealth. We were having some technical difficulties, and that's why it popped us on. So we've been spinning for about the 5 minutes. Thank you to everyone who is here. Remembering that true health is really wealth, we're going to go around the panel as we always do, and we're going to introduce our esteemed guests. We're going to start with Dr. 100, who is here with us. Dr. Maya Green, our real community health doc. Go right ahead.
hey, can you hear me? Yes.
Yes.
Sorry, you caught me in the middle of talking about South Africa. We'll continue that conversation later. But thank you, Nikki. Thank you, Congressman, for making this space. I'm still excited about the faces and the lessons and all the good community talking and learning that went on this past Saturday. So I'm still thankful for that. Can you hear me? Okay, so I'm still thankful for that. Excited to be here to continue the conversation about what we can do to keep our families and our tribes safe in the ever changing times. So, thank you.
All right. To the chef extraordinaire who had a little hiatus for a few weeks, but I told you guys he'd be back. That's our very own Dr. Tony Hampton. Dr. Hampton.
Happy to be back and always happy to just connect with the community. It's a privilege to be able to help people in their health related journey. I find myself being a therapist, a doctor, a friend, a family member, and all of those things. So it's, it's just something to, be grateful for. So happy to be here. I tend to focus on lifestyle medicine as much as possible. And I try to always meet my patients where they are. So if they are struggling, I try to figure out why. And sometimes it's not the compliance taking the medicine. There may be some issues that are deeper. So I hope that what we share tonight helps someone out there who needs to hear our voices.
Outstanding. To our workout queen who did an extraordinary job on Saturday. That's our very own Tyrena Newkirk Sutton. Her husband wants us to remember to say Sutton at the end of her name. Go right ahead, Tyrena.
Good evening, everyone. Happy Monday. As Dr. Maya mentioned and everyone mentioned, I'm still feeling very invigorated after Saturday's conversation and looking forward to how we take that conversation into action in the future. So thanks for having me.
Who does a fantastic job. That's our very own Joe Harrington. Joe?
Joe Harrington, retired public health professional. I spent most of my career in healthcare and public health. And I was describing my career earlier this morning. I've actually been in a lot of different spaces. I worked in mental health early on in education and worked in clinical research, but happy to be here. Was excited to be a part of a panel at Saturday's meeting convened by Congressman Davis. And I really want to commend Congressman Davis for being the everyman and the person who's always very welcoming. When we opened our conversation before we went live, the first thing he asked is, how are we doing? He's the most inclusive person I know. He didn't ask how you were doing, he asked how we are doing. And he is concerned and working for the people.
Well, why don't you tell him?
Outstanding, outstanding. To the man who says I threaten him to be here every Monday night, but he seems to always be on time. That's our very own Dr. James Miller. Dr. Miller.
Good evening. Good evening. I am a retired internist, retired in 2019. Practice all around the area in Chicago and a couple of the near suburban areas. After retiring from clinical medicine, I have continued to try to heal the community because, healing is needed and we have to demand and we have to work towards healing our people and our community in order that we may be able to reach some of the goals and achieve some of the things that we need to achieve as people. So I'm here this evening to continue to contribute as much as I can in terms of answering questions, giving ideas that I have in terms of how we can be healthier.
Outstanding, and thank you so very much. To the man who makes for us. Everyone teaches us constantly that true health is wealth. That's our very own Congressman of the Illinois 7th Congressional District, Congressman Danny K. Davis.
Well, let me just tell you that I am so excited to be a part of this discussion. I had such an invigorating weekend until I just don't know what to do about it. We had the wonderful, wonderful discussion on Saturday at Build in a brand new $23 million building on the west side of Chicago at Harrison and Laramie. And I don't know that they've had a $23 million building built there in a long time. So I want to thank Build not only for building it, but also I want to thank its leadership for dreaming it, for thinking it up, deciding that they could do it. You know, I've been led to believe that if the mind can conceive it and the heart can believe it, you can achieve it. And so, whatever it is that they decided to do, they've done it. And then Sunday, oh my goodness, I had such a gorgeous, unbelievable day. I decided to stop in the MacArthur's restaurant and have a little lunch. And in walked the new mayor of the city of Chicago. And I told him they still got some chicken wings left. Not many, because they were running out of chicken. I said, but we didn't eat it all up before you got here. So that was a great opportunity to have some dialogue. And then today, we have been celebrating reentry. And a good deal of it has to do with health. And the Safer Foundation had its great anniversary of its reentry collaboration. And of all the things that we've done with reentry, a lot of folks would be, well, they just wouldn't know that Johns Hopkins Medical Center has played such an active role. They got one of the best records of hiring people who've been to the penitentiary and been to jail of anybody in the United States of America. And yet, every year, they are either number one, number two, or number three. Maybe they may go down to number four of being the top hospital medical center in the United States of America. And so we've had a great time all day celebrating second chances and talking about second chances and the fact that more than $1 billion has been allocated by the federal government since we passed our Second Chance Act in 2007, just for that alone. And the health community is becoming more engaged, more involved. Do you know that if a person had a record, they couldn't work in healthcare? I'm talking about they couldn't cut the grass on a hospital's lawn if they had a record. They couldn't sweep the floor outside in the parking lot that owned by a health facility that was doing it. And even people who had little lightweight stuff, they had to get approved by the Illinois Department of Public Health. They had to get a waiver to get a minor job, and that you could go to school and go to work and get a license to do certain things in terms of having the technical skill, but couldn't get a license. Guys would learn how to cut hair in the penitentiary, but come out and they couldn't get a license to be a barber. So a lot of good stuff is going on in health. Health is indeed wealth, because if you're sick, you poor, and you don't want to be poor. And so you got to try to be healthy so that you can do all right. So thanks to this group that's going to keep telling us how to do that. Thank you all, and it's a real pleasure to be a part.
Outstanding. Well, Joe, on Saturday, what group did you sit in on and share your conversation with us?
The group I sat in on was looking at health manpower, and we had a very robust discussion. There were a number of issues that we talked about, but one of the overarching issues, and I actually looked at it a little bit closer, was the possibility that the Supreme Court has a case they're going to decide that could potentially end using race as a criteria for admission into colleges, which would really put a damper on this whole issue, not only of affirmative action, but the real push moving forward for diversity, equity, and inclusion in our society. And there's a quote by Peter Drucker: you can't manage what you don't measure. And so if you don't look at the diversity of enrollment in our colleges and university, there's no way to have really any keen idea of who's there, and are there really underrepresented minorities or underrepresented populations that are not, for whatever reason, in medical schools, nursing schools, allied in schools that produce allied health professionals. So it really could change our ability to enter some of these professions and fields. So that was one of the things we talked about. We also talked about the pipelines. And when we talk about pipelines, there are a number of pipeline programs in Illinois and in the city of Chicago that prepare young people for careers in STEM. And while those are good programs, they tend to focus on high school students, and especially juniors and seniors in high school who are considering going to college. But one of the things we talked about is they need to expand that focus and work with students at earlier ages, so that they are prepared early in their academic career. One of the points that I made was based upon experience I had when I was actually working on the West Side in the mid 70s. And I managed a federal program in a parochial school, St. Francis Cabrini. And I was responsible for the kindergarten through third grade, and managed, I supervised all the teachers, work with them on the curriculum. One of the things that I observed, and this is something I observed, is that students in third grade who were not prepared to go to fourth grade were destined to fail in fourth grade. If you cannot read, really read and comprehend what you're reading in third grade, if you don't know basic math, how to add and subtract, it's going to be very difficult to actually read material, understand what the materials tell, and answer questions. If you can't add and subtract, you're definitely not going to be able to multiply. And when it gets to things like geometry, trigonometry, you're going to be lost. So we talked about how we should really have an emphasis on some of the lower grades to make sure that our children are prepared at an early age to compete, and are familiar with science, technology, engineering, and math, and have an interest in going to it. The last thing I'll say, growing up, and it might have been the same thing for a lot of people, that I never thought about careers in public health or medicine, anything like that. I always leaned toward, as a young child, the things that were adventurous, like being a cowboy, being a fireman, doing exciting things like that. As you get older, you begin to realize that if you're going to have a career in work, you have to have some practical skills, and you start focusing on some other things. But if you don't expose children, young children, to things at an early age, they may not be attracted to them, and they may have some difficulty later. So I think that there were a lot of things we talked about, but those are two things that really stuck with me, and I think are important they're important takeaways from our group.
Let me ask you, what percentage of the doctors in this country are Black?
That would be a good question for Dr. Bill McDade, who was there.
Right.
He actually gave the percentage, but it's
5.1.
21. The percentages are very low, and what my colleagues will tell you, it's not going up. I mean, the number of I serve on the urban health program at the University of Illinois, and one of the challenges is finding qualified African American male students to apply for an intermediate school. I mean, they're missing in action. So if we're worried about the number of African American doctors in this country now, it will probably get worse, a lot worse, before it gets better, unless we take some real action.
Really? With all this affirmative action talk, with all this cultural diversification that is taking place, I mean, you're gonna make a prediction like that?
I didn't say if. I didn't say it could have. I mean, there's always the opportunity to turn things around and to change things. And I think that's probably what we were pushing to do. The death knell would be the elimination of race as a criteria for the admissions into colleges and universities. That would eliminate a lot of people from attending college and having some of the careers that many of us have. And I heard a story on the news this morning that more and more young people are preferring to go to community colleges and technical colleges to get jobs now than go to four-year institutions because of the cost of four-year institutions. And they can go to a two-year institution and start working right away with less cost and making money. So there are a lot of things at play here.
My God, what do we do? Because I know that there are places where there are empty programs. I'm even in the community colleges. I know two schools that have been on the verge of losing their designation as a predominantly Black institution because they don't have the percentage of Black students that they need to have in order to qualify for those grants. And they are afraid. So what's going on? What's that song the guy used to sing? What's going on? What's happening?
Oh, Marvin Gaye.
Yeah, Marvin Gaye. I mean, It just doesn't sound like it ought to be happening that way.
So,
I mean, what is it?
Well, I'll make a brief comment, and I'll let some of my colleagues reply. And that is, the truth hurts. It pains me to know that that's the way it is, but that's the way it is. And it didn't happen overnight, but it's going to take some dedicated effort. And I think that all of us can help and do what we can where we are. And I see that Dr. Mason has joined us, and I don't know which Whitaker that is, but if it's Dr. Eric Whitaker, he might be able to speak to that.
Well,
another Whitaker.
I'm Officer Ed Whitaker from the 15th District. I'm not the pristine doctor.
Great.
He's a policeman.
Dr. Mason, could you speak to your involvement in pipeline programs?
Yes, can you hear me? I'm working with my phone. I'm having some technical difficulties today.
Okay.
I don't know if I can be heard, but I'm going to
We
talk.
hear you.
You can't.
Okay. pipeline program has been involved in for a long, long time, all the way going back to Project 75, as Danny knows, Congressman Davis knows, and going back to the Medical Opportunity Program at the University of Illinois, and even currently now with CPAS, which is creating pathways for academic student success. And that is one of the things I'm working with Dr. Whitaker on. So we're trying to do the best we can with the resources that we have, and it is a challenge. It's a real challenge because some of the schools in the areas where we really like to recruit students from aren't necessarily graduating with the tools that they need. So we're working where we can to shore up those deficiencies. And I should mention Project 75 and some of the other pipeline programs. So there is some difficulty, but we're doing the best we can with what we have.
Yeah, I think we need more resources directed at programs that create awareness that yes, you can have a career in like a medical field, and I think it needs to be an overwhelming number of programs. It can't be, it's like it can't be like trying to get into the Whitney Youngs and the Walter Paytons of the world, and you have to get lucky or just happen to know somebody that mentions it. It should be something that's well established, widespread, because I think once kids realize that we're just like them and that we all kind of had to take our path of struggle to get to where we are, but that path only really became reality because we never gave up. One of the things I learned when I was at Xavier, which is one of the better historically Black schools in terms of rankings, right? But even at a school like that, if you look it up, like there's a site called collegeresults.org, you still see a large percentage of kids who don't make it, right? And that's in the most nurturing environment you can be in. I mean, literally, their success depends on your success, just like it was when my kids went to Providence St. Mel's. So they had nothing but good intent to help you get through that, and yet people struggled because the foundation they had was not sufficient when they were challenged in school to manage, being a good student and all the things that come with that. They just didn't have that preparation. So it kind of starts. So we have to have programs and we have to get people involved early on. When me and Dr. Pete went to the Chicago Medical School, although we weren't in the CHAMPS program, almost every other student that was in our class was in the Chicago Health and Medical Careers program. If it was not for that program at the medical school we went to, we probably would have been the only two Black kids at the school. And we were fortunate to have gone to Xavier, which is a pipeline for that type of education. So I just think in fact, my wife's sister, who is now a hospitalist at South Sub, was also someone who had gone through that program. And what happens is you need a way to kind of fill those blind spots and gaps that have been created because we live in a society where it's not the same. My kids have advantages that other kids don't have. So when they did really well on the ACT, we had spent a ton of money on Kaplan private tutors. So what happens to the kid that doesn't get the private tutors? It's not really a fair world we live in. So we have to create an environment where we're honest. We're honest to say it's not fair yet. It's not equal yet. No matter what you want to imagine and think in your brain, that's in the past. No, the crimes of the past are still harming people. So we have to continue to live in a world where we give those resources. So when you have a kid in front of you who you've managed to filter through all the struggles they have at home and filter through the lack of resources that are financial or not adequate food and all the things that can make you struggle. And they're still motivated and you're able to assist them. We want them to have the same chance that my kids had. And that's only going to occur if we we have to care about this stuff. And it has to be our priority. And I think we don't have universal health care because it's not our priority. I don't think we have things like free pre-K and free elementary schools and all of that. I mean, colleges and stuff, because it's not our priority. So until we make it our priority, we're going to continue to see inadequate results. And it's very frustrating. I think what Dr. Mason's doing and other programs that are out there is exactly what we should be doing, but that should be something that the entire country should embrace. It shouldn't be just pockets of people who have passion. It should be the model for the country is that we're going to help everybody who wants to be successful.
Some people proclaim that we're not pushing our children hard enough in terms of intellectual stimulation. I'm saying we hear and we read about which population groups of children are excelling the most, which population groups have the most outstanding students, who is progressing the most. For example, Asian physicians in the United States seem to be increasing greatly. One out of every 7 or 8 physicians in the United States is an Asian American. It's a group that is pushing. I think the intellectual capacities exist among our children and among people who are super smart intellectually in terms of the capacity and the capabilities to do certain things. And we've got to find a way, whether it's removing some barriers or whether it's stimulating more pursuit. And I think it's a combination of all of that. That same thing, for example, we've been pushing aviation real hard. Do you know that there are only about 2% of the pilots in the United States, airline pilots, are Black? And that we have a way of, I'm saying, sometimes we use certain approaches, and I'll say, well, the pilots are a very homogeneous group, meaning that they're all white males. I mean, that's what it really boils down to. There are very few women and very few African Americans. And yet, we're the United States, my country, 'tis of thee, sweet land of liberty, where all people are created equal and endowed by their creator. And somehow or another, we're not actualizing what the creator intended. And there's got to be a way to do better than what we're doing.
Well, Congressman, I hear what you're saying, but the struggle that we're having right now with CPAS is, we're working on getting the resources and having the Kaplan courses and all of the different things that we can avail the students to. But the problem is the public school system is failing us. It is failing us miserably. And we cannot, and it's a lot of factors. I'm not saying it's all the school, but some of it is, the schools, if you look at the Illinois report card and look at the scores and look at these different tests that the children have to take, and you look at the scores in some of the schools that were in my neighborhood, they were all the only ones that right now that we see that do try and get through. They have to go to schools like a Whitney Young, or they have to go to a British school, or they have to go. We're not seeing not seeing the students from the average public schools. Maybe we never did.
Oh, go ahead.
We're not seeing them, and it's because even if they do get into some of these colleges, and some of these colleges, and we could offline that conversation, but even some of the colleges are accepting students, I guess for any number of reasons, perhaps some even political, that we know are not, that they're not equipped, not because of something they did, but because of what happened in their their secondary education at high school. And so we really need to think about how we do a better job getting these kids, getting these students through, and getting them to understand the sort of academic rigor they have to get themselves ready for, other than the ones that go to, like I said, the magnet schools. And that's what we see is that the ones that are relatively successful, the ones at the magnet school, the British schools, some of these other schools. But Chicago public schools, especially the ones in our neighborhoods, they're not, it's not ready for prime time. And from the looks that I see, from what I see, it won't be for some time. Based
I
on
just wanted
in the data, and if you look at the report card, you'll see how badly our schools are failing our children.
I just wanted to add two comments regarding those test measures. I think we need to be honest about the racial bias that exists on those standardized tests, and allow a tad bit of grace to our students, because those tests were designed for them to fail. So they are already climbing an uphill battle. And the second thing I just wanted to add before we transition to the next session is that there are some programs I wanted to make sure the community is aware of, like UIC's early outreach program. Shout out to Joseph Harrington, because I am an urban health grad as well. So I wanted to share that UIC has an early outreach program that starts pretty young and it goes through high school. And there's also another program that UIC is connected to called the Physician Scientist Training Program, which is geared toward getting students of color into MD, PhD programs. And I participated in that from 7th grade through college. So I definitely can speak to the success of programs like that. So I just wanted to make sure the community knew that there are resources and supports for things like that.
Yeah, I found the numbers that Dr. McDay quoted on Saturday. 64% of the physicians in this country are white, 20.6% are Asian, which makes up 84.6%, 6.9 are Hispanic, and 5.7 are Black. I also want to remind us of two things. I don't think there's any one factor or any one group or group of individuals to blame for what we see today. And what I was reminded of as I listened to discussion is the third principle of Kwanzaa, Ujima. We have a collective responsibility. And if we look to lay blame on other people for what our children are or are not doing, just like this whole issue about these young people coming downtown, if they're not our responsibilities, whose responsibility are we all have to get in and do what we can where we are. But as before we went live, one of the things we were talking about is reading. Everybody on this panel is an avid reader. We've been reading since we were children. I remember that I used to read comic books in my bed with the cover over my head and a flashlight, because I didn't want my mother to catch me reading while I was supposed to be asleep. And so reading is very important, but are we actively, not only as parents, but as a community, engage with our children? Some of us are to a greater degree, but we all need to be engaged in that and encouraging and uplifting, not demonizing our children for a situation that they didn't create.
Yeah, I really do agree with what's being said, and again, this is a village problem, and all the members of the village need to be able to pull together. And I'm not saying that there are not other ways, but let's be realistic in terms of what's going on, and we have to look at what we can do to help our students perform better. And part of that is that every kind of organization that is within our community need to make certain it takes into account the needs of the people of our community, especially the young people. So when kids get to high school and they're behind, they aren't going to. It's just catching up is almost impossible. So we got to start down. When kids should begin to start learning, that they are having the opportunity and their motivation to learn. There's a saying that probably we all have heard some version of it, that you can take a horse to the water, but you can't make him drink. My response to that: if he's thirsty, he'll drink. And we have to create that thirst to learn, thirst to succeed. We have to create that thirst. Then they will drink what's need to. They will perform and do what need to. They have to receive in order to be able to ascend to a better. But I think that this and there are a lot of things that are going on in households in the community that can be such a drag and a distraction to these to our children. But we have to, again, we must overcome that. We must add to that in whatever way that we can, whether it be our churches, whether it be our social club, our block clubs, and just regular neighbors. We got to get together again to say, listen, these are our children. I might not, I might not be their biological connection to any of them, but they are connected to us, and we have to understand and accept that connection and accept the responsibility that go along with that. That really is the only way that we're going to see, because you just can't take a small percentage of our children that probably will succeed regardless of where they went to school at. It's that other group that's failing, and within that group, I'm not saying that there's ability there, but the other ingredients are lacking, and we need to figure out ways that we're going to do something to improve on getting those things together, so that there'll be more that there are more available people to become doctors, to become other leaders in our community.
But
well,
I
the
guess
course. Go ahead, Congressman. Go right ahead.
Jesse Jackson would say we gotta keep hope alive. We gotta keep. Joe, we were talking about Lorraine Hansberry and this raisin business, raisin in the sun. What happens to a dream deferred? Does it dry up like a raisin in the sun? Fester like a soul and then run? Can we have a class of young African Americans and nobody in there can predict or see themselves becoming a physician or see themselves becoming a physicist or see themselves working on the next spaceship? And so this business of keeping hope alive, I think, is a big part of the equation. And where there is hope and a drive that individuals, get the opportunity to show what they can do. But somebody said we got to start with them when they learn to read and when they learn to talk. And as they are beginning this journey called life, because if you ever get behind, I mean, if you get behind, and it's like being behind Michael Jordan, and he's 2 blocks ahead, and he's wearing some Nikes, and you might be behind, but you got on some hip boots. Talking about you're gonna catch up. It's gonna be pretty challenging. It's gonna be very difficult. So we gotta level the playing field every way that we can. And that means, I think, just so many different things. I mean, just so many areas. Early childhood education has to be a big piece of it. Local schools have to be as good as the magnet schools. We got to create some more Providence St. Males, urban preps. We gotta but everybody's got to take a part and play a role in it.
Yeah.
And it can't be some people doing a lot and others not doing enough. I maintain that if you want to make something happen, get a whole lot of people to do a little bit and not just look to a few people to do a whole lot. And I think that we operate on a model of a few people doing a whole lot and not a whole lot of people doing a little bit. And if we could get that model to work, then we change conditions, situations, hopes, as well as aspirations. How do we do it? Yeah.
You know, Congressman, very quickly, I think you're absolutely right. And, you know, I hope my remarks were really talking about some systemic issues that we've got to deal with. And I would implore everyone in this room, go look at the Illinois report card, look at the schools in the areas that we're talking about, look at how they're performing, because that's important. But what was also important that when I was in grammar school and I went to public schools all the way through, you had teachers, and you talk about hope, Congressman. We had a science teacher who, on his own dime, and he was African American male, who had a class before school started for us to come. And I'm gonna say he was also a great artist. And he drew for the docs on the panel. He drew on the blackboard in such detail the intricacies of the heart. I learned about these chordae tendineae and all these different things in sixth grade, and that inspiration is what was part of the inspiration to want to go forward. And we're not seeing that, because the only kids that I know, for the most part, who get this, and we just had the mini medical school graduation at Rush University, and what we're seeing are the other things. Somebody mentioned Indians. Well, I can tell you from my experience working at county, where I saw lots, you know, some of them come from families where the grandparents have been doctors, their parents are doctors, their brothers. We have one where everybody has been. And the same thing is true. And the system of education is very different in India, and in some of you'll see it also in a lot of the African countries, because they use the more English British based system, which is very, very different and far more challenging than our system here. So what we try to do with CPAS is we try to mine this to find those nuggets that we could really work with. And I think it was Audrey that talked about the programs at the University of Illinois. I'm an urban health. I mean, if one medical opportunities program, and Congressman, you remember Dan Cantrell, but also Carol Cantrell, and oh my God, his name escapes me right now, but those people who were working all along that pathway, making sure the encouragement continued and made sure that the resources were there. And when we got to the University of Illinois, the Medical Opportunities Program even was there to provide us with even more resources to be able to work collectively. And that's the other thing that we're not seeing as much. That's people working collectively toward this. This is not something you can totally all do by yourself. And we've got to, what I'm planning to do is we're going to start taking a much harder look at some of these schools that our students are coming from. I mean, you got students, it's really pathetic, that Congressman, and one of these days we need to have a real serious heart-to-heart conversation about what's going on, because some of these children will never get a chance because they're just not being adequately prepared, either at home or even when they get to the schools.
And I think part of it is impressing upon them how much time, energy, and effort has to be put into what they are hoping to do and what they are preparing to do. And I don't think we talk enough about that in terms of you make certain sacrifices. I often say that he or she who sacrifices little accomplishes little, but he or she who sacrifices much accomplishes greatly. And that the people who, been what we call successful really put in a lot of time, energy, and effort preparing themselves. And if you're not willing to do that, it's pretty hard, to just kind of wave the magic wand. And there it is. I mean, all of you can probably think of the nights that you were up late and the real time to do whatever to get through it. I know I stayed up sometimes all night writing dissertations and stuff. Nobody promised you a rose garden. And if you put the time, energy, and effort into it and massage it a little bit, it begins to blossom. So it does take a lot of self-commitment to become these leaders of medicine, science, and industry, and all of the other stuff. It's a little more than luck.
Yeah, outstanding. So Virginia Knight says, evening, everyone. Great day to be alive. Linda Johnson says, good evening, everyone. It was good seeing you guys on Saturday. Yolanda Williams says, good evening to everyone. Connie Taylor is here, and she says, good evening to everyone just as well. Jack Lynch is here, and he says, good evening to his team. Kevin Newkirk has a question, and we're going to grab his question in just a second. Tamika Thomas says, hey, Uncle Terry. Of course, she's speaking to her uncle Terry. Sister Bonnie is here and she says, good evening. Nellie Purnell King is here and she says, good evening to everyone. Audrey Jaycock says, good evening, everyone. Nellie Purnell King also says, poor foundation in the formative years. She's also saying absolutely to some comments that was made. And Audrey Jaycock also says, Jesse Jackson also said, no one can save us from us but us. We had 8 robust conversations going on Saturday, and Joe shared some topics about number 8. Officer Whitaker is here, and he got called away really quickly, but now he's back for a second. I think that's what his text message said to me, and he's going to comment briefly on session 2, which is the session that he was a part of, and I know he's going to have to pop back off. So Officer Whitaker, Ed, if you are here, Ed was a part of our violence and public health issue, so go right ahead, Ed.
Hi, thank you for having me. So yes, in our group, we did speak about violence being a public health issue. What we pretty much discussed was when we first started, we talked about was the food that we're eating. Is that kind of a way that the kids right now are they trying to act out because they're not being fed well? I talked about our sports alternative program where we have like 500 kids, and most kids don't eat from 7 o'clock to all the way to 7 p.m. So what we noticed was the youth are almost delirious. They are, as an adult would say, hangry. What they're doing is what, in my opinion, they're reacting out of being malnourished. So we talked about that. We talked about the police as it relates to, how someone's mental health is playing a part. We had one gentleman during the session speak about as an officer is in uniform versus an off duty where they're in plain clothes, what that actually does to their mental health. So that played a major part in anxiety, um, and I think that's probably it.
All right. Well, Ed, I thank you so much for taking a few moments to share that information that you guys came up with and also some of the resources that you had in that. Still, who's here with us, want to say hi to Michelle Garrison, my cousin, who's actually here with us all the way from Lake Providence, Louisiana. I miss our summers together there, and she's now over in New Orleans. It's the smallest suburb of New Orleans, and we will see you soon there. I want to say hey to Michelle, who has checked in with us. Thank you so very much. Well, Maya, I know you were one of our team leads in session 4, which talked about bedroom business. Well, what's bedroom business all about?
Well, bedroom business is understanding one of the functions of humans and how we stay on the earth, which is reproductive experiences that humans have. We talked about how we can connect with our legislators to talk about how we standardize it. Look what's happening across the country with abortion and termination of pregnancy, um, criminalization of STIs and HIV, and how that impacts our community. And it's not what we found it's not so far from other things, right? Like many of the sessions, it came down to whether or not something is supported after it moves into Black communities, right? So if you look at HIV and AIDS, I'll use that. All the funding was there, and there's still funding, and we have legislators fighting to keep that funding, but the legislators have to fight to keep the funding because in 1981, the face of HIV was white. In 2023, the face, meaning the majority of people living with HIV and bearing the brunt of horrible outcomes of HIV, are African American. Just like HIV, just like the opioid epidemic, just like violence, historically, where they put the money, when it moves into African American communities, we're seeing a decrease in funding, or our legislators have to spend more of their time that they could be legislating for other things, keeping the funds moving into the community. So it came down to looking at social determinants of health, understanding the process. So the reason why we talked about the function of life is because we wanted to take the taboo off of something every face on this panel. Your parents had some bedroom business. That's how you get here. And it's part of life. You eat, you breathe, you excrete waste. Humans have to reproduce. If we don't, there's a thing called extinction. We will fall off the face of the planet. So let's take the taboo off of it, talk about it, own that process for us, just like we own nutrition, own that process for us, just like we own education and furtherment and making a wage for our lives, and speak up and talk in communities. The solution to that, and I'll take this time because I will have to hop off and give my until next Monday, if that's okay, quickly, Nikki. The solution to that is just like the solution that we talked about education. As a former educator, a lot of people don't know that I used to be a teacher, but doctor means teacher too, so I'm still a teacher, right? What I found, I used to teach at Carver Mill and Allgale Gardens and Betty Shabazz Charter School, so shout out to my peeps that are listening from there. And first, I was a high school teacher. I taught science at Liberty Temple. But the bottom line is, it is a community effort. Education is a community effort. And the first teacher of any child is their parent. And that's where it all starts, right? But our parents, we have to hold our parents up. We have to hold our teachers up. We have to hold the people that are imparting into our children up and advocate for them, just like what we came to with bedroom business and HIV, STI criminalization laws. The same thing, which is what we have to hold the legislators up who are promoting our community, promoting wellness in our community, and promoting wholeness in our community. We have to hold our educators up who are promoting wellness and wholeness in our community, and we have to do it. the community has to do it. We can't count on other people to do it. So we have to know who they are, link ourselves together, hold our healers in all forms. Legislators are also a form of a healer. You know, teachers are too, just like doctors, right? We have to hold our healers up and our promoters of wellness and our facilitators of wellness and healing in our community. Hold them up. Don't let the community tear them or outside sources tear them down, because we didn't get to one of the factors that happens to the Black men in medical school, the Black people in medical school. You get there and you say, yeah, you got in. We don't recognize that just like inequity is built every fiber of someone's experience, this country is like that because inequity was built into it. So we have to build in equity. So that experience is going to school, studying all the while. Sometimes your professors are telling you can't do it, and having the hubris to try to change the narrative on whether you can do it. We have to hold each other up in these spaces, and that's how we're going to have success. That's how we're going to build community wellness and wholeness. Thank you so for letting me take that time, Nikki.
Outstanding, outstanding. Want to say hey to Alderman Pat Dow, who's here, to the Honorable Dorothy Brown, and I didn't forget the last name, Cook, is here with us just as well. To Don Patterson, who is here, we'll be making a brief announcement shortly and sharing some information. To Deborah Crable, who is here. To Nikki Hayes, who is here. Renelle Perry is here with us. Spencer Leak, hey, Spencer, here with us on the scene. To Mandine Mohammed and Jamil Mohammed, who are here just as well. I got your text, Mandine, so we were going to definitely give you a shout out so people can also listen to your radio show that you have there on WVON. Well, Tarina, I know that you have this love for our session 3, even though you can sit through the whole part, but it was Mommy and Me Aren't Doing Well, infant mortality and maternal mortality. Why don't you share just a little bit about that, and then tell us about the Best Baby Zone that's in our district as soon as you unmute yourself.
Yes, thank you. I was just pulling up the notes here for from that session. And some of the notes were focused on just social determinants of health and how to empower young people to get engaged in prenatal care. Another big takeaway was related to reducing the number of stillbirths and giving patients, some folks thought that some suggestions for medical staff would be to give patients more than 15 minutes with their doctors, and to connect more folks to doctors with specialties, better access to specialists in the medical field, especially since Black women are dying in childbirth. Maybe there should be some insurance changes to give us access to maternal fetal medicine doctors, which are just specialties within the OB-GYN field. Another suggestion was group education for moms or that are in their prenatal, and how we can better prepare them for birth and early childhood. I'm trying to see what else they mentioned. Some opportunities for getting folks to appointments include support with transportation. And so those were the primary thoughts around Black maternal health. Some other things were just trying to get insurance companies to pay for telehealth appointments to make it more accessible for moms who don't have transportation or who don't have access to prenatal care, physical access to prenatal care, and then just a corridor of access or the lack of access for labor and delivery was some other key points that were brought up in the maternal and child health session. You're muted, Nikki.
Thank you. So I know a number of people asked us about the Black Blues, and I think we need a whole show to share the Black Blues. Donald, they had a robust conversation, just as robust as that health and manpower. Those were probably, there were 3 very loud conversations going on that got passionate. So we will have Donald do on next week so he can share that with you just as well. You know, you guys hate to hear me say this, and I hate to tell it to you as well, because I like being here with you, but it's our time. It is our time. And as always, we're going to go around the panel And we're going to ask everybody to share their until next Mondays. But right before we do the until next Mondays, I do want to share a brief announcement with you. Urban Transformation, supported by Congressman Danny K. Davis, has a Climate Smart Agu Health Expo. This expo will be May 10th, 2023. That is May 10th. That's a Wednesday from 10 a.m. to 3 p.m. at the Berlin Center. Join us at 2622 West Jackson for this outstanding healthcare event. There will be agriculture, health screenings, fitness, food choices, and nutrition. So join us. If you have any additional questions, please make sure you contact Dr. James Miller, who's here on the panel. He'll be there and ready to answer any of your questions. But join us. We have a number of community partners that will be out doing healthcare screenings on that time. So we look to see you there. Once again, that is May 10th, 2023. That's May 10th from 10 a.m. to 3 p.m. All are welcome. All are welcome. Well, Dr. Mason, you're until next Monday.
Well, thank you. This has been a great, stimulating panel, and I'm going to tell you that it brought back some things almost, but that brought tears in my eyes as I think about the journey I had through medical school, getting there and everything else. But I'm reminded of something that Judge Eugene Pincham used to always say. He said, "You can't be what you can't see." And unfortunately, a lot of, when I was growing up, we used to have a lot of docs in our community. But what's happened is that the practice of medicine becoming corporatized has changed a lot of that. There is no doctor's offices per se like it used to be. So it's and so we've got to think about that. The other thing that we've got to also think about is, how do we support the children, especially the ones that may have promise, but their light gets snuffed out because of just the same situations that's causing a lot of the crime. We can't divorce the crime and all the other problems that are going on in our community and not think that that's going to have an adverse effect on our ability to make certain that we get these children out to be able to do and thrive that in the way that we know that they can. So it's good to be able to have this forum. And I think for those of you who are still working, unfortunately, many of you are because medicine's changed, or working corporately. And we got to figure out a better way to get docs to see, children to see people that look like them in a way that they get a chance to talk to them that I had with Dr. Zoller, Dr. Adams, Dr. James, and Charlie Williams, and all these men and women that were just wonderful. So we just got to work on that. And we got to also work collectively with our school systems, because our children are going to be like John McWhorter said, we're losing the race. We're losing the race. And we've got to figure out how we work with these schools to help us prepare students that can come out of a high school and even think, or a grammar school, and go to a good high school and go to high school and go to med school. Otherwise, we're only going to get the students that end up privileged enough to go to some of these special schools that are not public schools necessarily. So that's mine until next Monday. I hope we can work on that.
Outstanding. Dr. Tony Hampton, you're until next Monday.
I'll just echo, similar message, and it's a mindset, really, and it's really unfair that we live in a world where my kids are exposed to a certain kind of way of thinking that other kids are not exposed to. And I remember even my mom saying to me, "You studying too hard. That's going to make you crazy." Right? Now, most people on this panel know that's not really true. You do have to get rest and things, but that's literally what she said, because there was some relative who went crazy. So listen, it's a mindset. See, I taught my kids what was possible and what is possible. I taught my kids, as Congressman suggested, that struggle is expected. It's just going to be part of the journey. I taught them how to stay the course. I taught them even how to study. I mean, how many parents who are struggling at home to pay the bills working, 2 jobs are going to have the bandwidth to actually spend time with their kids with their homework. I mean, I had time, and I also knew that I needed to sacrifice for them so that they would be successful. So we have a lot of gaps, and I think part of the solution is that people need to see us. I know that Marion Williamson, who's running for president potentially, has a big TikTok following. So maybe we need to all be on TikTok so we can get the young audience to realize that we exist. And until we get to a world where there will be more parents who have resources and experiences and understand how to inspire their kids, we're going to have to be those parents for those kids and be that inspiration. And hopefully inspire the parents to let them know maybe I struggle, but this is something that my babies can do. So I think it's complex, but maybe the solution is simple. And we just got to be comfortable just taking baby steps until we get to a better state. So Nikki may be frozen. So maybe Dr. Graham, you can make your comments.
Well, thank you, Tony. I just want to add to what you said about the parents having to work 2 jobs and not being able to spend time with their kids. This goes up all the way up the chain. And we can tell you that when we look at Black men and women who are applying to medical school, they may not have the funds to apply to enough schools and don't get selected, or don't reapply and get selected. And that's the major reason why many of them drop out, because they have to go back and take care of their families. So that may be an area that could be addressed in a way that may be as important as teaching the kids. And how do you allocate community resources to see that these kids have enough support to finish their educations?
Outstanding, outstanding. And Tony, thank you for taking up for me, because as you can see, my AT&T went crazy for a few minutes. And Tony, while I have you here, I have a quick question for you. Kevin Newkirk says, what about low-cost medical clinics on a sliding scale for those who don't have health insurance?
Yeah, even when I worked, I work for a large health system now. And when you work for a large health system, it's a little different in that they have to think like a business, right? So they're going to have some people who are under that Medicaid umbrella, and then they're going to have everybody else, right? So they have to kind of model a sustainable model. And so that type of model is going to require funding, right? So it's going to have to be private donations. Like when you go back to Providence St. Mel's, where there was a lot of people who donate money. I think the Pritzker's family even had something to do with their success. And you also have the government and other entities. And to be honest with you, I am a huge fan of charity, but and I want donors to donate. But I do think that again, going back to priorities, if we prioritize education in such a way that, or health in such a way that we'll make sure everybody has access to care, then that'll solve the problem. I know that when I worked at Circle Family Care, there was a little bit of a system like that where you paid based on what you could afford. And I think that you can have a model like that, but Circle Family Care doesn't exist anymore. And I would argue that they don't exist because the business part of that methodology wasn't sustainable. And although they did get extra funding because they took care of a lot of Medicaid, it was just not sustainable. So we need to live in a world where there's access to care, and we need to be careful because we're getting to a point. There's some crowdfunding companies that are popping up, which will then allow the community to fund their own insurance, right? And at a cost that's pretty attractive. So I think sometimes the people have to rise up and say, if the current system is not working, let's be creative and create a new system. Imagine paying $175 a month for your insurance, and 30 of those dollars going to the owner of the company, and then the balance is left for you, and you'll get that money back, except that maybe you have to take 30 or 40 of those dollars and give it to the people in the community who need to have the brain surgery, right? And that's the model that they've created. and that's what we're going to have to do until the system makes changes.
Thank you so very much. But also want to share, if you know someone who is in need of seeing a physician and may not have adequate insurance, do not let that deter you from getting medical care. We have great FQHCs out here that can assist. And there is a very large clinic that sits in the Westtown area that does see patients for free. I will make sure that we share that information with you. So we'll share comments. So if anyone needs that, they can definitely have it. But we definitely don't want you to use emergency rooms as your primary care physicians. We want you to know that there is an alternative out here for those who may be a little challenged right now. And we have some services for you just as well. And Val Talley says here, and he thanks everyone for sharing that information. Well, Tyrena?
Okay. I think you're saying for me to give mine till next Monday. So I just wanted to share with the audience, because I'm always here to talk to the community. I want to tell them that back after the Montgomery bus boycott, Dr. King wrote a book, Strive Toward Freedom, and he said that the greatest tragedy in the pursuit of social justice is not the strident clamor of bad people, but the appalling silence of the good people. And I say that to the audience to challenge them to get engaged, get involved. The 8 of us on this call cannot solve health disparities in Chicago on our own. We need for the community to step up and to participate in your own freedom, participate in your own deliverance, because a few can save the many, but not in time to save us all. So I wanted to just share that with everybody and say, see you next Monday.
All right, Dr. James Miller, you're until next Monday.
Till next Monday, we have to come together in terms of really recognizing how much we need each other. In order to be, life is a struggle for a lot of people. And the struggle wouldn't be as difficult if they could just get a little help in hand. And we just keep, and I know we say, well, we're going to depend on the government to give all these help in hand, but sometimes that help in hand just might mean just a pat on the back, or to show a youngster that somebody that you care about them. So we gotta, I know we can look at the negative and the bad things that are going on and the results of, but we have to understand that it's the results of a lot of input and negligence and neglect that is causing these kinds of things. So we got to really come together and step up and stand in the gaps. There's some parents that's just not able to do what they need to do for their kids. Either, someone mentioned that some parents maybe have to work 2 jobs. Some parents are just not prepared to be able to give their kids and to be there for them for all those things. But we got to figure out better ways to cooperate with one another in our community, be better neighbors, be better friends, be better brothers and sisters to each other, and to understand again that these are our kids. And we have a responsibility to do what we can to help them get along and to achieve the best life that they can. They often can't do it without a little help. And so we got to be willing to give that help where it's needed and when it's needed.
All right, outstanding. Joe Harrington, next Monday.
Well, mine for next Monday, I've got 2 things. One is a quote by Fannie Lou Hamer. She made it in 1964, and people are probably familiar with it. I'm sick and tired of being sick and tired. And so if you're sick and tired of being sick and tired, do something to help yourself and that also helps somebody else. And my other one is 1 Corinthians 13:13. And now these 3 remain: faith, hope, and love. But the greatest of these is love. That's it.
All right. Well, Congressman, take us home.
Well, I was thinking that I'm tired of my dreams being deferred and whether they keep drying up like a raisin in the sun, festering like a sow and then run? Or do they stink like rotten meat, sugar over like a syrupy sweet? Maybe they sag like a heavy load, or do they explode? And I guess the explosion piece of it becomes a real part. I really have enjoyed this discussion. And I'll just say a couple of things. Yeah, we do have a couple of basically what we call free health centers or clinics in Chicago. Very difficult to run, very difficult, very challenging. People volunteer and go to them and work, but trying to coordinate schedules and all of that is quite challenging. But then Chicago has one of the best healthcare delivery systems, quite frankly, in the country in terms of delivery systems, basic care. We've got about 50 clinic sites in my district alone in terms of all the federally qualified health centers that we have. And you can go to those if you don't have any money, and they'll hook you up. I mean, they'll give you basic health care. Then we have a county government that has a responsibility to provide medical services to the indigent. So anybody that don't have a dime, you don't have to have a quarter. You don't have to have 15 cents to be able to get some health care in Chicago. You just go to Cook County or one of their clinics, and they'll ask you a bunch of questions to try and figure out if you have any payment source. And then if you do, they'll try to get money from that source. But if you don't, they're not going to kick you out and say, we can't take care of you. That's one of the main responsibilities of our county government. I'm talking about that's what it does. So we got to make sure that we give our people all of the information in terms of how do you access what is available and how to make the most effective use of it. I've always maintained that health awareness, health education, health promotion, that we have a lot of responsibilities when it comes to health, to our health, our individual health. I may not know a lot of science and a lot of things about what Dr. Mason and Dr. Miller and Dr. Hampton, Dr. Meyer, what they sometimes be talking about. But I know when my corns hurt, I know that. And I also was fortunate to have the best podiatrist, I think, that ever walked on air. And that was Dr. Adams. Dr. Adams, the daddy of the earth, wind, and fire people. He was their father. And they used to live in the projects, in the Henry Horner projects. And he used to talk about how he blew his horn and played music to work his way through medical school, because he'd also do gigs and that kind of stuff. And then he started telling you about Maurice and what they did and what they're going to do. all of that. So I guess just taking as much responsibility for self as we could take. If it is to be, let it begin with me. And if we're not doing that, then we have to find ways. I'm pretty geeked up right now because I'm pretty excited about the new mayor and some of the things that he appeared to be interested in doing and say that he's going to attempt to do. And I think all of us need to try and help him to do those things as much as we can. So until next Monday, where there's life, there's hope. Where there's hope, there is possibility. And where there's possibility, there's probability. And we just have to ignite all the fires that we can. We're going to hear lots this week about money and whether or not the government will have the money that it needs to operate. Because we're going to be talking about the debt ceiling. We're going to be talking about other folks want to cut Medicaid. Can you imagine cutting Medicaid? So all this health care we're talking about, if they cut Medicaid, there won't be no way to pay for it. If they cut Medicare, there won't be no way to pay for it. If they cut Social Security, then you can't go to the grocery store because they done took your grocery money away. So that's going to be this week in Washington. So I'm going to go there with the understanding that if a task is once begun, never stop till it's done. Be the labor great or small, do it well or not at all. So I'm going to go there probably protesting this week and voting no on a lot of what my colleagues will have on the agenda. So till next week, have a good time. Enjoy life. And as Jesse Jackson would say, keep hope alive. We keep hoping. See you then.